The now very conservative Supreme Court has issued a ruling that a California regulation that allows union organizers to organize farm workers on farms is unconstitutional. The vote was 6-3 with the court's 3 liberal members in dissent. More about this regulation that was overturned though, the state regulation issued in 1975 and unique in the nation allows union organizers to meet with agricultural workers at sites in the hour before and after work during lunch breaks for as many as 120 days a year. So we're talking about in and around where agricultural workers are actually doing their work. Of course, the decision is overturned on some really BS grounds, and we'll get into that. But just so you know the history behind something like this, behind the 1975 ruling, the reason it happened then was because it was on the back of the massive farm workers movement led by Cesar Chavez after a grape strike for 5 years, a lettuce strike for another, I don't know how long, but these were crippled the California economy and showed the country that farm workers are workers and they deserve the right to form a union, to boycott, and to also have union organizers on the fields with them. And so that has now been undone, that legacy, yay, because welcome to America. So Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority and said that, quote, the access regulation grants labor organizations a right to invade the grower's property. That meant, he wrote, that it was taking of private property without just compensation. What are they, picking strawberries while they're there? No. They're there talking to workers. I don't get this. He continues, the regulation grants union organizers the right to physically enter and occupy the grower's land for 3 hours per day, 120 days per year, rather than restraining the grower's use of their own property. The regulation appropriates for the enjoyment of third parties the owner's right to exclude. Okay, what? That sounds very fancy for no, workers don't deserve rights and private property trumps that. Initial thoughts on this kind of a ruling?
Yeah, I think after looking into it a little bit, I think it's important to focus on how rulings like this don't just center in whatever the case is. So this isn't just about California. These types of rulings set precedents and implications for other cases that may come up. And so really, you mentioned one of John Roberts' quotes, but one of the things that he said is the right to exclude is one of the most treasured rights of property ownership. And how this blurs the line is when we want to focus on the takings clause in the Constitution. And basically the takings clause has two parts. One is per se takings. And basically that's if the government just comes in and just straight robs your land or makes it basically economically useless or takes away all of its production. And then there's another called regulatory takings, which are for extreme violations. Let's say you're a restaurant and you have rats and roaches running around in your kitchen, or you're a construction company and you're building with improper materials that may collapse on people's heads at some point, maybe in 20 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. Regulatory takings make it so that the government can come in and do basic inspections, so that they can make sure that everything's safe. Now, how John Roberts blurred this line is now anything can really be considered a per se taking. So as you mentioned how, unions, they had a right to be on these farms about a third of the year and for 3 hours a day. Well, now it could be considered a per se taking if they're on that property for just 1 minute. So this can spread out to restaurants, this can spread out to all different other types of industries to where, don't come into my restaurant and check on me. If I want roaches and rodents running around in my kitchen, it's my right because freedom in America. You know what I'm saying? If I want to build a school that's gonna collapse on children's heads because it'll save me, maybe $30,000 or more than that, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? $1 million. Then screw it, you know what I'm saying? It's not the government's right to come in and tell me how I can build these things. And this really highlights the danger of the Republican Party and how it functions. Basically, their goal is to privatize every inch of society to the point where you wanna drink out of that public water fountain, you're gonna have to pay for it. You wanna go on this road, you gotta pay for it. You wanna make a left and then a right, you're gonna have to pay twice. You know what I'm saying? So this is, and let alone during Trump's presidency and how him and Mitch McConnell was rolling and how Mitch McConnell been doing his thing. They got over 200 Republican federal judges and appointed just while Trump was in office. And now you have Joe Biden, who I call him Mr. Nevermind. That's what I call Joe Biden. He was gonna go after student loan debt. Never mind. He was gonna,
expand the court.
Oh yeah, never mind. And then this infrastructure deal, that's not even $1 trillion. What was it, 579 billion last I read that was supposed to be their agreement? I mean, we might as well not do anything at all if that's the case. Our infrastructure hasn't been upgraded in decades. The country's literally falling apart at the seams, and yet and still Republicans do not want to pay for anything, because ultimately the worse it gets, it makes private industry more attractive, or so they think. And so basically we're watching the right wing in America become more and more and more, as you mentioned before, fascist and determined to privatize every corner of society. So again, those the takings clause, the per se takings, which now is blurred from the regulatory takings to where, now going forward, if you want to come in and tell me that I'm doing this and that wrong and it's dangerous, it's not your right. I can do what I want. So that's really,
it's not a place of work either. It's a piece of private property, and I think the line gets blurred when it's a farm. But a farm might as well be a Target, and it might as well be an Amazon factory. Woz, I want you to jump in, but real quick, I want to just explain where the case came from. So this is Cedar Point Nursery versus Hasid, arose from organizing efforts in 2015 at a Fowler packing company, a shipper of table grapes and citrus, and Cedar Point Nursery, which grows strawberry plants, as I said, strawberries. And so Cedar Point Nursery sues California officials in 2016, saying the regulation letting unions have access to their properties amounted to a government taking a private property without compensation. And the growers lost in the lower courts. So once again, we have this conservative Supreme Court that is deciding which cases it wants to take up. It's reaching down like an Ayn Rand god down to these like already decided cases and be like, yes, I will dust this one up that upholds private property, and look, criminalizing abortion, let's do this. Like, they love to do this stuff, and here you're right. When Mitch McConnell and Trump did their damn thing, that was appointing and successfully getting 2 conservative judges onto the Supreme Court. 3, excuse me, what am I talking, 3. Why?
Right, and I think it's important that folks keep their eye on the ball, right? I think a lot of times when we're in the middle of the culture war with the right wing, it's easy to get distracted from what the point of all of this is. They do all of this critical race theory to keep folks distracted. The real job of the Republican Party is this: pack the court so that even if business interests lose at the ballot box, let's just say we get a great Democratic majority somehow in both houses in the presidency, and we pass all kinds of, basically progressive laws that are helpful to working people and working families. Business interests and the oligarchs would be like, hold on, I got one more bullet left in the chamber. I'll take you to court. And they're always gonna win in court, because that's the entire point of Mitch McConnell ramming through as many of these judges as possible, because it's one last resort. When they haven't won at the ballot box, they can always count on the Supreme Court to count in favor of the business interest. That's just what it's gonna be.
Which is interesting, because Biden, I believe, at least, and this is a lot of what he's been doing, but at least with his words, verbally, seems to be supportive of unions and the right to unionize, But like, again, given where the infrastructure bill is headed, I totally agree. Look, the 2 ways around what just happened are expand the Supreme Court and pass the PRO Act, which will drastically revamp and support workers around the country. Unionization in this country is at a dismal low in terms of the private sector, right? So do we see either of those 2 things happening? I don't think so.
Of course not. Like David Schuster said in hour 1, Joe Biden's all carrots and no sticks. And it's not just Joe Biden, it's the Democratic Party as a whole. I mean, they all have the same donors, and therefore the powered interests get what they want pretty much no matter what. And that's very hard to fight against, it just is. It's not impossible, it's been done many a time throughout the history of civilization, but things are gonna continue to get radical, because the Republican Party is all about raw power and winning at all costs. and the Democratic Party and this fake push for bipartisanship. People need to realize that bipartisanship, they're not talking about Republican citizens and Democratic citizens.
Exactly.
Who for the most part are pretty much in line with the same types of policies. They're talking about a few hundred people, 500 people between the Senate and the House of Representatives. And that's all they're talking about. You know what I'm saying? And again, they all have the same donors. So it's just a bunch of nonsense.
I also think that, the one silver lining, I'm trying to find the silver lining to this ruling, is that it really shows the labor movement, the power of interracial, multiracial workers struggle, which I think is what Cesar Chavez showed in the 70s, right? There were a lot of Filipino farm workers, there were Mexican farm workers, and there are white workers, right? And the fact is that this is all to divide people. This is further making an already precarious job, which is being a farm worker, even worse, right? And so citizen, who's gonna work this job? Well, no, they're largely undocumented immigrants. They're largely immigrants in and of themselves. And so that is a strategy to divide working people. So I hope, man, after all the losses that the labor movement has taken, that it really can be a spark for something broader, something more transformative to come. Yeah.
And I want people to understand this last thing about the Dems. Let's just say the Supreme Court had just ruled on something that the GOP's base is universally opposed to. Let's just call it no more subjugation of Black Americans, right? Every major GOP politician would come out with his freaking hair on fire the next day. This is a travesty. I don't know what the hell the courts are doing. We gotta do something about this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Democratic Party, which is allegedly the left party, the party of working people, allegedly in this country, they're not gonna come out and say diddly about this. Nothing. Yeah. You're not gonna hear anything from Pelosi. You're not gonna hear anything from Schumer. You're not gonna hear anything from the leaders of the Democratic Party establishment because they don't actually care about working people for real.
Maybe not even Gavin Newsom, right? This is his state. Definitely not Pelosi. This is her state. We're talking about California.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.